Hi everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Lisa Keeney, and I am an alumna of the University of Michigan's School of Music, Theater, and Dance, and I currently serve as an editorial assistant for the George and Ira Gershwin Initiative. We are presenting to you from U of M's Britten Recital Hall in front of George Gershwin's Steinway. The first concert of the SMTD season will be on September 23rd with the University Symphony Orchestra. The USO will be premiering two of the Gershwin Initiative's new critical editions, the Piano Concerto in F and the unabridged version of An American in Paris. Also on this program will be two works by composer John Adams, the Chairman Dances and his Saxophone Concerto, which will feature soloist Timothy McAllister. Joining me to discuss the orchestral saxophone in the works of Gershwin and Adams is Dr. Timothy McAllister, the professor of saxophone at the University of Michigan. In addition to being the featured soloist of the Adams Concerto, Dr. McAllister has also been a frequent guest with ensembles such as the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and the Los Angeles Philharmonic. It's a special treat to introduce him to you, especially as a graduate of the Saxophone Studio at Michigan. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's begin with a general question.
Sure.
What is the orchestral saxophone, and why is it considered as an anomaly or a specialty instrument in orchestral music?
It's an anomaly for many reasons. The political side of it, the political troubles with Adolphe Sax, Monsieur Sax. Economics certainly played into this as well. You had to hire other musicians, specialists on these new instruments. There was no pedagogy that allowed necessarily for instrumentalists of that time to simply pick up the saxophone. You had to get to the source. You had to go to Adolphe Sax himself for his instruction. This is why there was a position created for him at the Paris Conservatoire at the time. And then just maybe a lack of understanding of what the saxophone could be. And I think it's very interesting that composers were using saxophone in relative extremes. You had maybe one camp of composers that were deciding that the saxophone was this embodiment of the bourgeois or the embodiment of the everyman, the music of the streets. So there's a wonderful tradition there, but when we go all the way back to the 20s and maybe the late teens, the way composers like George Gershwin now were seeing the saxophone as the embodiment or emblematic of dance band music, the beginnings of dance band, or the codification, if you will, of the dance band ensemble as a true medium. So it's either going to be a solo classical sound, or it's going to be using the saxophone to emulate these early jazz bands. Mm-hmm. And that's what leads to a piece like American in Paris, or the way Gershwin used it in Rhapsody in Blue.
Right. So Rhapsody in Blue, legitimately takes the dance band and the jazz band sound in his original version of it, orchestrated by Ferdi Grofé, by the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, which had 3 wind players playing multiple saxophones. Whereas in American in Paris, he takes that same sort of idea within the full orchestra, taking 3 saxophone players and giving them doubling instruments. Can you tell me a little bit about your experiences playing the orchestral arrangement of Rhapsody in Blue and An American in Paris? Because most musicians know that the saxophone is required for those pieces, but what most people don't know is that the most well-known and most performed versions of those pieces were arranged or revised by people other than Gershwin after his death. And these versions greatly alter the saxophone's original parts, either streamlining them to avoid doubling or even to make them optional in the case of Rhapsody in Blue. And having performed both of those versions, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your experiences playing those revised versions.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the history of how those pieces have been adapted to fit with either publishers' needs or essentially the growing economics of the orchestra. I have, for instance, I've played Rhapsody in Blue before, in which I was the only saxophonist they hired, because it was the version where all the saxophone parts were obligato in the first place. So they decided to hire 1 player as opposed to 3, just to certainly pay homage to the saxophone's use in that. There was just something so hollow about that orchestration missing two other saxophone players. So what's particularly exciting about these new, the revisions, I guess the unabridged versions that we are producing, is that it's putting the saxophone back in its rightful place. It's asking more of the players to, in essence, be more accountable to Gershwin's initial original intent for the instrument. And I think as a result, we'll raise the bar on performance from the saxophone community.
Right, and so looking forward now to John Adams and his use of the saxophone in City Noir, how do we go from An American in Paris to City Noir, and how are they similar?
John Adams, in some ways, is this natural trajectory from how all of these composers were tapping into the instrument's culture. For John Adams, and he has said it himself, the saxophone is emblematic. It is the emblem of jazz. So with City Noir, for him, it is the embodiment of a Los Angeles culture of the 30s and 40s. He's not using the saxophone simply the way Gershwin did, or simply the way Milhaud did. He taps into some of that lyricism, yes, he taps into some of the ability to embellish, but he's putting the saxophone at front and center as a virtuosic instrument, drawing upon all of the insane ability of great players like Charlie Parker, but maybe more like Eric Dolphy, or the real gritty, as he would say, nervy quality of Ornette Coleman, or all of the real post-bop players moving into the avant-garde side of jazz. So for him, that's where he found the voice for the saxophone in that piece. So I would say that he saw himself as having an opportunity to showcase the saxophone very much the way Gershwin did.
So we have the pleasure of hearing you perform the Adams Saxophone Concerto, which stemmed from this relationship during the City Noir. Can you talk a little bit about the Saxophone Concerto itself and the saxophone writing?
Sure. I like to call it the child of City Noir. The Saxophone Concerto is it's an outgrowth of the types of playing and writing that we see in City Noir, we hear in City Noir. And this, to him, is the sound of those projects with Charlie Parker and Stan Getz, the crossover projects, even Freddie Gardner, this idea of the studio orchestra, the sound of the studio orchestras, the NBC orchestra, not a full symphony orchestra, but a small extended dance band orchestra that maybe Gershwin was using, right? Because you have strings, you have winds, you have small, modest percussion. So I actually think of the Saxophone Concerto as, in some ways, the sound is linked more to a Gershwin sound world or a creation of the world sound world that Milhaud was implementing.
So what kind of statement do you think this University Symphony Orchestra concerts program will say in support of the orchestral saxophone, especially here at the University of Michigan?
Well, first and foremost, this concert is a celebration of so much of what we do here at Michigan. It's putting scholarship at the University of Michigan front and center, the Gershwin Initiative, what this represents, the idea of living, breathing scholarship. It is a statement of what we do here, and we have wonderful student performers interacting with that side of the school through the Gershwin Initiative. I think what it says about saxophone, it certainly puts the saxophone front and center as well for this concert to represent both composers on both halves of this concert, through the Saxophone Concerto of John Adams, through the revised and enhanced saxophone writing within American in Paris. To me, this is a celebration of everything, but if I'm to be partial within that, it is a celebration of saxophone here at the University of Michigan.
Excellent. Well, we are greatly looking forward to your performance, and thank you again for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much for this. This has been really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Once again, the first concert of the SMTD season will be on September 23rd at 8 p.m. in Hill Auditorium in Ann Arbor, featuring the University Symphony Orchestra conducted by Kenneth Kiesler. The Gershwin Initiative would also like to thank Novus New Music, Inc. for helping us to produce this video. If you have any saxophone-related projects, we encourage you to check them out at the information listed below. Thank you again, and we hope to see you there.